connect with an electronic device should mute it to avoid feedback. Any remote part, I can never say this word, any person attending remotely, please keep your cameras and microphones off unless you wish to speak, and ideally do not use the camera facilities as this can affect the quality of the meeting. The meeting may be recorded, and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's websites. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their Swale Borough Council or Kent's County Council laptops to participate virtually. If you join us using the link on the website or on a mobile or tablet device, it is not always possible to identify you, and you may not be recorded as being in remote attendance. I ask all members to speak loudly and clearly into their microphones and to switch their microphones off after speaking. Otherwise, remote participants may be unable to hear the next speaker. Right. Welcome to members and officers and any members of the public to the Audit Committee meeting. The following staff are in attendance, either in the chamber or remotely. Director of Resources, Lisa Fillery. Head of Audit Partnership, Catherine Woodward. Interim Deputy Head of Audit, Alison Blake. Audit Manager, Grant Fulton is Richard Narakundo. I hope I've done that right. And also Audit Partner, Darren Wells. And Democratic Service is Kelly McKenzie. Oh, and Claire Sambry, Head of Finance and Procurement. Thank you. Are there any other officers in attendance? Right, do I need to go through the evacuation procedure? Yeah, everyone happy with that? Right. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies received from Councillor Simon Clark. His substitute is Councillor Tim Gibson and Councillor Pete Neal and Councillor Mike Henderson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All items are Part B reports for a decision by the Audit Committee. Item 4, Internal Audit Plan. Oh, sorry. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Right, thank you for that. Right, item 4, Internal Audit Plan 2023-24. I invite the officer to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So agenda item 4 on pages 5 of your report packs is the Internal Audit and Assurance Plan for 23-24. So there are 3 recommendations as part of this report. The first is to approve the Internal Audit and Assurance Plan. The second is to note the Head of Internal Audit's view that Internal Audit has sufficient resources to deliver the plan. And the third recommendation is to note that the plan is compiled independently without undue influence of management. So the purpose of this report is to set out the Internal Audit and Assurance Plan for 23-24 to members. The report details how the plan is devised, the resources available, and the specific audit activities to be delivered. The Public Sector Internal Audit Standards direct that the plan is risk-based, and page 10 details global and sector risks that we've considered in this plan, and council-specific risks are described on pages 11 and 12. The next area I want to cover is the resources, which is on page 12. So we currently have some vacant posts within the team, and we're reviewing the structure of the partnership with a view to fulfil all substantive posts by July, or to commence recruitment from July onwards. We have access to some sources of specialist expertise through some framework agreements that we have, which we will utilise while we're currently recruiting to those posts to assist us in delivery of that audit plan. Section 15 of the report details the days allocated for Swale Borough Council to deliver audits from the partnership. And section 18 sets out the audit engagements that we intend to deliver. Of the audits that we intend to deliver, I think it's really important to note that we've got some flexibility and that this plan that I present to you today is flexible to enable us to respond to organisational priorities as they may potentially change throughout the year. I've only been in post now for 4 months, so coming up with a plan obviously took a little bit of time to make sure that we've got something together and reviewing what had happened previously and what needs to take place. So the plan that we've got here in front of you is where I think we need to focus our attentions on for the Borough Council. It's been agreed at management teams and heads of service have all had input into this plan as well. So they're all content with the work that's in it. But as I said, I just want to stress that it is flexible so that if we need to move things around to get the best results for the authority, then that's what we'll do. I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was waiting to see if there was an explanation for the projects that are being undertaken in the 23-24 year, i.e. leisure services not delivered in 21-22. I could guess that might have been related to COVID, but guessing is not good in terms of audit, is it? And the other one was land charges 17-18. It's a hell of a long time ago. If they were weak at the time, I'd have been in there the next year. And the third point I wanted to raise was on the counter fraud support. Absolutely support that. I really do like the anti-fraud stuff. So if you want to give us any more explanation about what you'd be doing on that, I'd be very grateful. Thanks.
Yeah, so those 3 audits that you mentioned, so leisure services not delivered, that was to do with both our Mid-Kent Audit Partnership resources and resources within the leisure team as well to deliver that audit response as well. COVID obviously did have an impact upon us being able to go in and do some of those audits on leisure services. Land charges, indeed, like I say, I've inherited a lot of this, so these are things I'm picking up. These are things I'm picking up with land charges. Obviously, just to point out, it was weak at the time. The recommendations have been implemented, but it hasn't been looked at since 2017-18, which is why I feel very strongly that we need to go in and cover this off. Land charges is a shared service across Maidstone, Tunbridge and Swale. So of course it's the same situation for all 3 of these councils. It's not been looked at in that time. So I think it's opportune time to go in and review that area. The other one you mentioned, counter fraud. So yes, something obviously quite close to my heart with regard to counter fraud, making sure that we do, policies are in place. And one thing that I would like to do is to be able to bring some information back to the committee on the work that we're doing with counter fraud as well. So that will be something that we will incorporate next year as well.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Okay, so this area is one that's been picked up as well by some of my other partner authorities as well with staff wellbeing. So these risks that are here are obviously global risks that we consider when we're compiling our audit plan. So we look at all of these things as a collective when we're compiling the plan, which is why I've got some HR related audits in the plan to ensure that we're encompassing things like that. Specifics that you mentioned there, like our working from home plans, remote working plans and various things like that. They're things that are the responsibility of the management team to do, and we wouldn't necessarily audit the specifics of those things. So these lists that you see here are just our risks that we use to determine our plan, rather than looking directly at those areas. But those areas, they are very valid, and within our own team, there are areas that we have found working from home. I mean, working from home is a blessing for some and a curse for others. It's a very challenging area, but it does present risks to all authorities. Various agile working arrangements as well. So they are just things that we consider as part of our risk appetite when we're determining our plan.
No, I appreciate that. Maybe it's something I think needs to be flagged, because hopefully you should see that improving, because if not, what's been put in place isn't working and it needs to be reassessed. But I accept your answer and that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. One thing I'm interested in is emergency planning. Whilst we've got to accept what tier authority we are in the wider scale, but things like cybersecurity, which will obviously impact on that potentially. But we had quite a significant incident last year, and in terms of water supplies on the island. And I'm just kind of wondering there doesn't seem to be a great deal in there, whether you'd be able to make a comment on that for us. Thank you.
Yeah, so emergency planning is a standalone audit that we have in the plan for next year to deliver, work specifically on the authority's business continuity and emergency planning approach that it takes. It's something that we are doing across all of the authorities within the partnership as well, because we feel that will potentially add a bit of context and potentially best practice across all authorities. And chances are, if something's affecting one area of Kent, it's probably affecting another area with regard to emergency planning. So we will try and do a bit of cross-cutting work across those areas. With regards to cybersecurity, it's a huge area for any local authority. At the moment, it's not going away. If anything, the risk is getting greater, and it is obviously quite a high risk on all audit plans. So part of what we were saying earlier about the risks we consider, that's one of the reasons it is in our audit plan this year, because we need to ensure that there are some really good national initiatives for ensuring cybersecurity within local government is up to standards, which is very helpful for us because it gives us national guidelines to follow when we're working on cybersecurity. And obviously working very closely with the IT partnership as well to make sure that we do a bit more work around working with them very closely. And I've got quite a good relationship with the head of IT partnership, and we're already in dialogue now about that audit and how that will take place and what that will cover.
Thank you.
Councillor Knight, did you have a? Okay. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really on the IT. I'm glad you've got a good relationship with the partnership. Would you be commenting on competence or otherwise of the people or of that part of the organisation to do these things? One of the basics is, oh, it's not working. I'll switch it off and switch it on again. It's very technical, isn't it? Thank you.
So with regard to the ICT partnership, they have recently just undergone a restructure where they have appointed a specific cyber officer. So I think that potentially is there to address that exact concern, making sure that they have the required skills within the team. So obviously it's something that they recognise as well. and it also gives us a single point of contact for that cyber risk.
Are there any more questions from anyone? Right, there are three recommendations. Do I have a proposer to agree the recommendations? Councillor Gibson, and a seconder? Councillor Palmer. All those in favour? Unanimously. Thank you. Right, item 5, Risk Management Annual Report. I invite the officer to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report you have before you is split into two parts. The first part sets out the risk work undertaken during 22-23 and aims to give the Audit Committee assurance that the Council has in place effective risk management arrangements that have operated throughout the year. As can be seen from pages 24 to 25 of your papers, the Council has continued to identify and manage its corporate and operational risks. During July 2022, this committee approved a new risk management framework, which included new criteria for assessing risks. Following the framework's agreement, all risks were reviewed, updated and rescored using the new criteria and have subsequently been monitored on an ongoing basis against the new framework. The second part of the report sets out the focus of the risk work for 23-24, which includes a refresh of the corporate risk register and further risk training to embed those processes and a risk culture. The role of Audit Committee members is to gain assurance that adequate risk management arrangements are in place and are operating, and as such, members are asked to consider the report and the operation of risk management in the Council, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from anyone? Well, everyone's, there's no questions, right? Do I have a proposer? No. Could you give me your... Thank you. Councillor Knight. Hey? Knights. Well, you had your finger on it. And a seconder, please. Councillor Harrison. All those in favour? Unanimously, thank you. Right. Now on to item 6. Right, Auditor Annual Report 2021 to 2022. I invite the officer to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So apologies, first of all, that the covering reports were not originally published with the two auditor reports that we've got for the next two agenda items. Their substantive reports were published, but unfortunately I didn't submit my covering reports. So I will hand over to Darren to talk you through their annual report, which does include 6 recommendations, and depending on how much detail Darren goes into on those with you, we will either come back to those afterwards to discuss, or it will be covered with Darren's section. Darren, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. So this is the last report for the 21-22 audit. It discharges our responsibilities to give commentary on the authority's arrangements to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness. It's the second year of a new style of reporting, and it's based on the requirements of the Code of Audit Practice established by the National Audit Office. What we are asked to do as auditors is to review your arrangements to ensure financial sustainability, good governance, and to ensure that your arrangements mean that you use the resources at your disposal in the most economic, efficient, and effective way possible. We're asked to highlight any significant weaknesses that we identify within your arrangements, and also provide a balanced commentary, so highlight the positive aspects of your arrangements alongside any areas of development that we identify. So I'm pleased to say that we didn't identify any significant weaknesses in your arrangements, so that's a strong positive. We have identified some areas of improvement, and we've made three improvement recommendations for financial sustainability and 3 improvement recommendations for governance. And I think for us, the most pressing of those 6 recommendations is recommendation 3 on financial sustainability. The council has used its reserves over a number of years to underpin the annual budget. And your latest medium-term financial plan indicates that reserves could all but be exhausted within the next 2 to 3 years. And we consider that your Director of Resources has clearly sounded a warning alarm for the time to act. And we think there is a short window in which the council needs to act, and that's to identify a risk-assessed, deliverable medium-term savings plan to ensure that reserves are maintained at a sustainable level, that services can be transformed or refined in a risk-managed process, and that the council's not in a reactive position, but is able to control and plan its future delivery of services. The report sets out management's responses to all 6 recommendations, but I'm happy to pick up any questions that members may
have. In addition to what Darren has said, I think we should also consider the something that is very different for Swale. In fact, most local authorities is the recommendation for the independent members on Audit Committee. So I would welcome your views on that, and potentially a timescale of how we start to look at that for next year under a new administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm quite happy to agree recommendations 1 to 3 and indeed propose it. Recommendation 4, I mean, ever since I've sat on this audit committee, which is the day we started it, we've had various audit bodies suggest we have independent people. Indeed, at one point it was, you should have an independent chairman. No, love, we're elected members. We'll manage it. So I can't support recommendation 4. Recommendation 5, quite happy to support. Recommendation 6, I looked into the business of the website a few years back when, we won't name names, but the officer that one might think was in charge of it was trying to get it up to scratch, but it appears that most of the information is owned by the services, heads of service like planning, leisure and all the rest of it. So whilst he was doing his best to try and get it up to date and get it equality accessible, whatever the terminology was, he had no authority because he didn't own it. So whilst I think it's a good idea, it is a long job and would have to get in the list of priorities, being as certainly he and every other member of staff, as far as I'm aware, not sitting twiddling their thumbs looking for things to do. So that's my 2 penneth, Mr. Chairman. I'm quite happy to propose recommendation 1, 2, 3 and 5, caveated recommendation 6, but I do not support recommendation 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Do you endorse recommendation 1, taking into account my management comments? or recommendation 1 as it stands from the audit team?
I said number 1.
Yeah, but so the recommendation is from the external auditors, and then we've got the management comments, because I am of the view that we already do take account of the savings in our business as usual budget monitoring. So I don't want us.
That's what I thought we already did. I thought it was just for the sake of having another recommendation for something that we already do, because I know people do these things. I've been here long enough to know that. So I wouldn't expect us to do anything differently, because we already get that information. And overall, I would say it's a pretty good report. We've got no money, but we've got all the processes and stuff in place, and the officers banging us on the head to tell us where the problems are. Just need a bit of cash, really, don't we?
And in response to the independent members on Audit Committee, this is likely to become a mandatory requirement of local authorities. So I'm just throwing that out there as well.
Councillor Palmer?
I don't know. I can see the logic of having independent people onto the audit committee, particularly if they're independent people with expertise in that field, because it's part of the openness that we all say that we want to have. So I can see the logic in having some independent people with expert knowledge and in the field of audit. On recommendation 1, I'm not sure if I heard it correctly, but what you're basically saying is there's a recommendation from the auditors that we have an extra report, but the management comments are saying, well, we do sufficient, we don't need that extra report. And I can see the logic in that. So I would probably go for the management comment on recommendation 1. That's probably caused even more confusion.
Can I come back on this independent thing, Mr. Chairman? Because
Yes.
A number of years ago, we had a member councillor on the audit committee who used to turn up at audit committee meetings with FRSs. They were this thick, each one of them. Is that what they're called? I mean, he used to stagger in with all these books. And indeed, he was arguing with the external auditors as well as the internal auditors on points of interpretation. Members were reminded firmly that you are not here as experts. The experts are the auditors, internal and external, and the officers that we employ. It is not our job to be experts. Ergo, I don't see any point in having independent people there who are experts, because that's what we're paying for. If they were independent people, they would just be independent people. They wouldn't be people who were expert in auditing and all the rest of it, because otherwise, there's no point having our officers. So that's why I don't agree with having independent people on a council committee, because if you want to sit on a council committee, get yourself elected. And indeed, there are already independents on the council's audit committee, aren't there? And out of the 4 people here, 5 people here, 3 of them are independent. Aren't you?
Darren, would you like to come back?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to come back in respect of recommendation 1. So hopefully we've made it quite clear that we've made the recommendation because it's something that we do see increasingly across other authorities. So we fully understand the Director of Resources position that any savings made are taken out of the base budget. But I think particularly where you are in a situation of the level of savings increasing over the years, and that's you face that scenario certainly over your next medium-term financial plan. We're seeing that where those authorities have amended the budget to strip out where those savings have been identified and made, that they also, for completeness and transparency, also report as part of any budget monitoring report the actual achievement of those savings. The reason they do that is because it's quite possible for there to be the intention to make savings, but still incur overspends, which can mask the fact that although there was savings planned, they haven't been delivered. And because the budget's been adjusted, potentially the overspend against budget shows that the savings haven't been implemented as planned. So it's not an additional report that we're proposing, it's an enhancement to your existing budget monitoring report. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Just noted that we asking for recommendations 1 to 6. That we're going to, we're going to number 1. We're going to note what the management comments were. Is everyone in agreement with that? Sorry, that's what the recommendation is, but to put that the note what the management comments were on.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, are we going through these recommendations one at a time? Because I've already said I don't support recommendation, whatever it was, 4, in which case, if you're taking them all together, I'll be voting against them all.
So we'll go on, could I have a proposer for recommendation 1?
I'll propose that we do not accept recommendation 1 because it's already part and parcel of our budget monitoring report, and we wouldn't want anyone to misunderstand that we needed to do an extra report, because we don't. How's that?
Seconder. All those in favour of that? Carried unanimously.
Can I just ask about recommendation 4, about the co-opting of independent audit committees? I agree with Councillor Harrison. Also, what I'd like to ask, would this be a financial implication to the council to have to pay 2 more people to be co-opted onto the committee?
We would need to draw up the terms and conditions of the appointment, but it is likely that we would have to pay a level of allowance to an independent member.
Right, we'll go to recommendation 2 then. Oh, hang on. It'll be best separately, else we're going to get confused. Right, could I have a proposal for a recommendation 2? And a seconder. Thank you. Those in favour of recommendation 2? Carried unanimously. Right, we go on to recommendation 3. Could I have a proposal and a seconder? Councillor Gibson. Seconder. Councillor Harrison. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Right, recommendation 4. Could I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Palmer. A seconder. I will second it. Councillor Carnell. Right, all those in favour? All those against? Total 2 in favour, 3 against. Right, recommendation 5. Could I have a proposer for that, please? Councillor Palmer, and a seconder, Councillor Harrison. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Recommendation 6, proposer, Councillor Knights, and a seconder, Councillor Gibson. All those in favour of recommendation 6? Carried unanimously. I can never say that. With all them recommendations, I asked everyone to note the external audit annual report noted. Thank you. Item 7, audit plan 2022-23. I invite the officer to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, this is to be presented by the external audit team. The covering report lays out the position that we have got with this year's audit plan. The plan as it stands includes a period for the external audit team to come in after the deadline of when the statutory accounts should be published. And so I am advising the Audit Committee that if that is a position that we are not able to change once the overall audit position for Grant Thornton has been reviewed, that we request that Grant Thornton advise the department, DLUC, that the deadline can't be achieved and to request an official extension for us, because we actually have to have the draft accounts published by the 31st of May. And so we are not able to meet the deadline of the 30th of September, and we are in a position to do so. I would like the auditors to clear that position with DLUC.
Proposed. Seconder. Aaron? Oh, no, Rich. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening to everyone. So as external auditors, we are required to present an audit plan, which details our identified risks, timing of the audit, and then follow up on any prior year recommendations. I assume that this paper has been read by every member. Our key highlights will be on page 8, where we have identified 5 key risks. This risk is in line with our understanding of the council and our prior year work. The other bit I want to highlight will be on page 17, which is on value for money. During our initial planning work on value for money, we have identified no significant risks. At this moment, I'm happy to take questions, and then we'll speak around the timing.
Thank you very much, Richard. Anyone, questions from anyone? No? No questions? Thank you, Richard. Sorry. Hey. Yeah. Right, recommendations. Number 1, to note the annual audit plan presented by Grant Thornton, subject to confirmation of the audit timetable as detailed in the body of the report. Noted. recommend number 2, to consider the requirements to amend the date of the audit the audit committee once the audit is completed. Do I have a seconder for that? A proposer for that? Can you? Sorry,
Mr. Chairman, it isn't actually a question. Consider the requirement to amend the date of the audit committee once the audit is completed. Well, I'm quite happy to consider it, but that doesn't do much, does it? I'm more than happy to say let's change it. And what we just proposed about getting DLUC to agree a change of date. So we could say agree to amend the date of the autumn audit committee once the audit is complete. How about that?
as you want to propose that, Andrew?
Yeah.
Councillor Harrison,
Yeah.
seconder, Councillor Denise Knight, shall we?
Agree
All
to
those
amend.
in favour?
Yeah.
Thank you.